Well, good morning, everyone. So this is the first really getting down to, the nuts and bolts kind of session. And what we like to have is for these GCV conferences to be super practical, for everybody to be able to take away, a lot of things in your notebook, that you can try. And so that's why I'm so delighted that, to have George Kellerman here, so I'll tell you a couple of brief things about George, and he'll fill you in on more. George is the best kind of CVC because
really?
because
must be the beard.
Because not just the beard. The beard is obviously a great fashion look, but it's because you've founded more than one CVC, right? And we have a few in the audience who've done this. I see Stefan's sitting there as well. And there are more of this kind of profile. But I always find when I speak to CVC founders who are on their second or, maybe third or whatever, is that it's great because you come from the first one and then you're so determined not to make any of the same mistakes again. You've already learned. So you come into the second one with this really clear idea of what you're not going to do, what you're going to do. So just to say briefly, George has come originally from a VC background, right, with 500 startups.
500 startups. Yep.
So then came into CVC through, founding the team at Yamaha Motor Ventures, ran that, and then came to Woven Capital, which is the growth fund of Toyota. So doing all this kind of really interesting stuff with the smart cities, mobility, and all of that piece. And kind of already in the 4 short years that you've been doing this, you've already expanded the remit from where you originally began, right?
Yes, at Woven Capital.
Yeah. So, okay, and then just to set the context, so you're 4 years in, which means that
5, actually.
So you've already made it through the first hurdle, which is for a lot of CVCs, it's surviving the first 3 years is hard.
Came really close.
So if you look at, on the tables is the World of Corporate Venturing. I'm going to put in a small plug for that. Please do take that book if you find one. You will not be able to get your hands on that anywhere other than at this conference. And it has all the facts and figures that Jim briefly showed in the slides and more. So, but one of the things that book shows you is that sort of about 60% of CVCs have made it through that kind of survived beyond 4 years, right? So, which is good news, more than, 50%, so we're already beyond the halfway point of CVCs surviving longer, but there's still 40% that will at this point just, they'll be wiped off, right? The company changes, the CEO changes, right? And only 25% make it through to what we call the resiliency phase, which is when they've made it roughly about the first 7 years. I also like to think about it more that you've survived at least one CEO change and maybe one downturn, right? And then you can truly say that you're resilient. So I think you're kind of, you're almost there.
Almost.
But what's cool and interesting is that you've set it up from the beginning really with that resiliency in mind. So that's what hopefully you're going to tell everyone the secret, the silver bullet.
Yes, I will. But I want to add one thing to my track record. I actually, before I was a managing partner of 500 startups, I was an angel investor, lost all my money. And so I decided I needed to lose somebody else's money and joined 500 startups. So 500 startups was a high volume investor. We were doing 250 to 300 investments per year at an average check size of $100,000. And so that's where I really learned a lot of how venture actually works. But let me give a quick introduction. George Kellerman, founding managing director of Woven Capital. Woven Capital is an independent $800 million growth stage venture fund backed by Toyota. And we invest in the future of mobility, but the way Toyota defines mobility is a little different than you might intuitively think about it. When we talk about the mobility of people and goods, that's pretty obvious. Moving goods, whether it's by plane, ship, train, car, moving people and goods. But we have 2 other mobilities that we focus on. One is the mobility of data and information. bits and bytes are moving. Right now, some of you may be checking your email, may not be engaging enough to be watching me. But everything that we're looking at is how it's in a connected world. It's not about just making a smart, intelligent, autonomous vehicle. It's still connected to the infrastructure. It's connected to the other vehicles in some way. So the mobility of bits and bytes. The fourth mobility is energy. The mobility of molecules or electrons, whether it's going through an electric grid or even gasoline, you have to mine the oil, and transport it, convert it to gasoline, put it in a vehicle, and move it. So from that mandate, we cover a lot of different areas, and our focus is to expand, accelerate, or drive operational efficiencies for Toyota Group companies. So we're really what we call a Horizon 2 investor, and that's why we're focused on growth stage. We're not necessarily looking for the next moonshot. We're looking for that company where we can partner with that company from day one and create synergies together. So our typical check size is 10 to 50 million. The average is about 30 million. And that's our first check, but we set it up as a fund just so that we have the capital to do follow-ons as well.
Yep. Okay, so tell us a little bit about how you set Woven Capital up, because it's a separate fund for a start. And I think when you came in, you were very determined that was the model that you wanted. So talk us through.
So I do have to, and then Daniel, our marketing partner, said I can only mention Yamaha once, because I actually started at Yamaha Motor Ventures on the corporate VC side. I was the founding COO. And, but to your statistics, we launched that in 2015, and so it has survived 10 years. So we did a lot of things right. But through that experience, and I eventually became the CEO, I learned that there were still areas that we could improve. And so when we came, and when I say we, the original founding CEO also came to Toyota at the same time I did to launch, and I launched Woven Capital. We learned a lot about that, how to set it up. How you set it up from day one is so important to get that trajectory right. A lot of times companies just go, we should have a CVC, let's set something up, here's a budget, let's grab some people from inside the company. One of the things we did, sorry Daniel, I'm gonna say Yamaha twice, that we did correct at Yamaha, but we also copied this at Woven Capital, is we did not hire anyone from within the corporate. The whole purpose of our existence is to transform the company, to bring outside innovation into the company. We have an open innovation mandate. If we just take people from the existing business, we're just going to replicate that way of thinking. Our job is to educate and train them in how to think differently. We leverage them. We work very closely with them. We have many part-time secondees from the business that support our team, but the core team really needs to come from outside the company.
But then there are ways, obviously, that you then kind of bring them in, which you've alluded to. And I wonder whether we can almost jump ahead to that, because I really wanted to get into this question of the investment committee, the IC, which is so important. And again, how you've sort of structured the way that the relationship works between your core externally brought in people, but then engaging them.
Before I answer that question around the investment committee, I think it's important to understand the investment committee is the output, like that's the final approval process. But if you don't have a strong investment team, if you don't have professional investors, you're just going to bring stuff to the investment committee that might not be a good financial investment. Mm-hmm. So really kind of backing up, it was also, that's why from day one, at Woven Capital, we wanted to have an independent fund. We wanted to set it up as a traditional 2 and 20. Those who don't know, 2% means 2%, or 2 is 2% management fee, 20 is 20% carried interest. Because that's the kind of fund we wanted to be. We wanted to attract professional investors, and that means we're competing with VCs. If we don't have the upside of carried interest, we're never going to be able to attract that kind of talent. So we wanted to make sure that we structured it from day one as an independent fund, and by independent fund meaning we don't have to go back to the balance sheet every time we want to do a follow-on. We have reserves for follow-ons built into our fund model. So you have to really front load it, and the structure, the legal structure is really important. The investment committee on the other end is who's making the actual decisions. And in our case, we've gone through cycles. We've had probably 7 changes over the last 5 years, and that creates its own challenges. But we were very clear from day one that, well, this is actually in the limited partnership agreement. As the managing director, I'm automatically on the committee, but I also have the ability in the limited partnership agreement to nominate one person. And what we did is I used that to nominate an independent, so that it wasn't going to get filled by a Toyota executive. And the independent on our investment committee today is Rob Conybeer, who is the founder of Shasta Ventures, a very, very successful multi-billion-dollar fund. And so Rob brings that traditional venture capital mindset and can give some credibility to our investment team and say, hey, I think this is a really good investment. And a good example, one time, one of the Toyota executives said, I don't think this is a good venture investment. And Rob's like, I disagree. I think this is a great venture investment. There's a lot of upside. So having that tension is really good. But he is independent, so he doesn't always vote with us. But typically, he comes to the management calls and actually participates in the diligence process. So he actually typically knows more than the other IC members. So that's turned out to be a real win for us. The other members, again, as I said, they've changed because our mandate has changed. But it's really around making sure that no one person has a veto. There have been discussions in the past, should it be unanimous voting? Should the CEO have a veto? No. It should be strictly a majority. So 4 of 7 need to vote yes. And we've had numerous investments where 4 of 7, and sometimes the 4 most junior people had voted yes, and it still passed. And they respect the governance structure, so that's what we have. I will comment, too, that in the very beginning, we did not vote in the investment committee because in the very beginning, everyone on the investment committee reported into the president of Woven by Toyota, which was our LP at the time. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Toyota, but everyone reported to him, including me, up through in that. And we didn't want to have a dynamic where if the CEO doesn't like it, everyone's afraid to vote yes or he likes it, so everyone votes yes. You know, we didn't want that. We wanted people to exercise independent judgment. So we actually voted by Google form after the meeting, so that you didn't know how people voted. We shared the votes with everybody, but at the time you were voting, you didn't see how anyone else voted. And it's a way to kind of remove that power imbalance.
And you moved away from that eventually because did it become a bit ingrained that people knew that they could be? We had
another member join the investment committee and said, no, we should vote here in the meeting. I demand that we vote in the meeting. So we changed it to accommodate that person's opinion. But we're likely to move away from that again, simply because the seniority and the level of people, they just can't come to all the meetings. And so we need to still be able to give people an opportunity to vote, even if they can't be there in person.
So you put in place all of these kind of measures, which really brings this kind of level of VC-like independence, the independent thought and so on. But then the other piece about longevity, as I think a lot of people in this room know, is the knitting it with the business, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you make the world's best investments if they're totally irrelevant, right, to Toyota. So I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about, you've done some very specific things that have made you had a fairly high success rate in terms of getting the portfolio companies then embedded in the business.
Yeah, but I just want to go back to you just talking about structurally setting up independence. The other thing that we do is a majority of the investment team has to vote yes for the investment, because again, we all have carried interest. So we don't want, and I tell everyone, it's not my fund. I don't want the team, well, George likes it, so push it through. No, we do a vote of the investment team. If we don't have a majority of the investment team, it never goes to the investment committee. So we actually act like a traditional venture capital fund. And we actually, one time in the investment committee, one of our investment committee members like, you guys are always voting, everything passes, you're voting yes. And we're like, that's because you only see the things that we as a team actually agree and believe are the best investments. And that's because there has to be a strong financial hurdle before we even bring it to there. But to the strategic side, we have what we call the portfolio success team. Their KPI is the success of the portfolio, not the success of Toyota. The Toyota business units can take care of themselves. They know how to run their business. We're never going to be better at running it than them. We're not going to be able to tell them what vendors or partners or startups they should work with. But the portfolio success team gets involved in the diligence process from day one. And they actually are voting as well in terms of saying, should this go forward? Because if they don't believe the business unit is going to support it, it might be a great financial investment, but we're never going to be able to get the strategic benefit and upside that we want. And then again, we use the secondees from the various businesses to support that. But the important thing is we've actually started bringing the business unit, I don't want to call them sponsors, and in Japanese culture, a lot of the Japanese businesses, if we say, do you sponsor this? They're like, no. That means I'm responsible, in the, harakiri culture of like, if it fails, I'm going to have to commit ritual suicide. No, I'm not sponsoring the investment. But if you invest, I'm be happy to work with them and collaborate and talk to them. So we just bring them to the investment committee. They don't have a vote. But they're there as a reference for the investment committee members. And the investment committee members can then ask the business unit, how do you intend to work with this startup? What is the strategic rationale? What is the game plan 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road?
And then you've put in place also, I think I made a note here of these like tech advisory committees that also exist, that they kind of give you, they might sound like they're just another committee, right? But it's like almost this mechanism, which means that there's this constant contact, right?
We actually kind of stumbled upon this. A lot of corporates get a bad reputation for giving really overly restrictive requirements to the startups. And we try to keep it as founder-friendly as possible. But there are certain things that we will want to ask for. But we keep it, again, very, 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 very light. We don't want to be thought of as not a good place to take money from. But we stumbled on this one concept, and we call it a technical advisory committee. And all it is the company is committing, and we put this in our side letter, committing to create a technical advisory committee where we can send our engineers and they can send their engineers, and they meet once a quarter to talk about the potential collaboration or the existing collaboration or product roadmaps. So it's really low commitment from the company. They love the idea that we're going to bring some of our best and brightest engineers to them, and they'll get to pick their brain, and vice versa. Our engineers get to ask them, what are you seeing in the market? And so it's really a technical group of people getting together, but the only commitment is meet once a quarter. You can change who you send. We can change who we send depending on the priorities. But we kind of stumbled upon it, and now it's kind of part of our playbook. Let's just automatically ask for it. We've never had a company say no to it because they love the idea that we're committing to send engineers to them.
And on the Toyota side, they've been also pleased to...
Oh, they love it. The only thing that I will say, though, is because we are Japanese-owned, and this has come up a few times, we generally have to go through CFIUS in the United States if they're a U.S. company, the Committee for Foreign Investment in U.S. And once you say Technical Advisory Committee, they start going, oh, wait a second, are you like sharing, do you have proper export controls, and are these non-Americans or, on the committee? And we're like, we're not sharing public or non-public technical information. Yeah. It's really around the collaboration and the way that we're working together. And we've gotten CVC comfortable with that, but it's a question they ask every time.
So worth being prepared for those if that's a route that anybody...
If you're a non-U.S.
Now, so time is going so fast, and I wanted to also just touch on this idea of, because part of this the title of this, if anybody spotted it, is multi-fund CVC. So this is obviously kind of the end trajectory often of a route for CVC where you become truly kind of multi-year, multi-independent, is that you're also multi-funding sourced. What are your thoughts on how do you kind of get to that? That's not something that, where Woven is yet, but...
Yeah, and sorry, Daniel, third reference to Yamaha. Yamaha's a multi-fund now because they are at the 10-year point.
Yeah.
And when you have a 10-year fund with a 5-year investment period, at 5 years, you need to start thinking about it. I first created the fund in 2019, but we did our first capital call in January 2021. So our 5-year investment period ends at the end of this year. So we're at the point where we're starting to have conversations around setting up Fund 2. What would that look like? What would the investment mandate be? But it is critical, and that's why I think it's important to have a fund from day one, because it's setting the expectation. This has a limited life. We will come back and ask for a new fund, but that doesn't mean that the uninvested part of Fund 1 should just keep doing new investments. It's reserves for follow-ons and for expenses.
Yeah. So again, going right back to the beginning, that fund stretch
Got to get it right.
So crucial. Now, I think we could talk much more about this, but I'm being told we're out of time. I think you owe Daniel a couple of drinks tonight for the multiple mentions of the company that he didn't want you to talk about, but I think also you're going to be mobbed with people who will want to ask you some more sort of during the call.
Well, and Daniel's here with our team. We also have Ayano Kase. She's based here in London. She's part of our team.
Wave your hand.
And Nicole LeBlanc, if I'm saying it correctly, she's French-Canadian, so I have to, LeBlanc. There, I got it right. But she's also here. She's speaking, I think, later today or maybe tomorrow as well.
Yeah, so the Woven team here in force. So, but thank you so much, George, for kicking us off with that.
Thank you.